Hello and welcome to My Emotional Armor, the podcast where we discuss the effects of covert narcissistic parenting. I am your host, Cindy Koo, a survivor and robot warrior here to share the ways emotional armor can help you heal, stay safe, and regain your sense of self. Hi everyone, hope you're all doing well. Today's episode on the polite robot method is one I've been wanting to do for a while. It was one of the big drivers for starting this podcast and is also the inspiration behind our little logo mascot, which you may have noticed is a robot. But before I get into the polite robot method, I want to first give some context around what it means to interact with a covert narcissistic parent. You probably know this by now, but conversations with your CNP were not normal. And since you're listening to this podcast, you're probably an adult with some inkling of what a healthy interaction looks like through work, friends, etc. And maybe you're just now recognizing for the first time that the ones you had with your parent growing up were actually pretty toxic. But because it was all you knew, things like constant complaining, self-victimization, blaming, manipulation, and rage became normal to you. This over time erodes your body, soul, and spirit slowly, very slowly. You also probably learned to be on high alert. It might have felt like you were always walking on eggshells, never wanting to trip your CNP off. If you said the wrong thing or reacted the wrong way, look out. As you can imagine, a lifetime of this is incredibly stressful. And there comes a time, usually in your 30s, where this is just not sustainable anymore. Something has to change. Now, there are countless articles written about the various ways to cut off a narcissist. I'm going to briefly describe them here in order from most astringent to least. The first is no contact, and it is exactly as it sounds. You go completely without contact from the narcissist. Now the next is gray rock. And I love the imagery here because it entails you becoming essentially the most boring person on the planet, essentially a gray rock. I think it can be really helpful to have a visual or maybe even a small rock that you keep in your pocket to calm and ground you during these interactions with a narcissist. Now what this looks and sounds like is saying a lot of yeah and uh-huh during conversations with your CNP and keeping your responses to the bare minimum. And the next one is called soul distancing, which I believe is a term coined by Dr. Ramani, an amazing psychologist specializing in the field of narcissism. If you haven't found her, please look her up on YouTube. She has tons of resources and is really wise and intelligent on this topic. I will put a link to her series on covert narcissism in the show notes, and you can also refer to my website, myemotionalarmor.com, for even more from her. In essence, though, soul distancing involves reserving the really authentic parts of yourself only for those that deserve it. And as history has told you, your covert narcissistic parent is not one of these people. They have been careless with your soul in the way they have blamed and gaslighted you all these years. So this method suggests keeping topics very surface level and not offering up much of yourself, not revealing your joys and successes or your losses and disappointments. So what I'm offering today is the polite robot method. It's one step closer from soul distancing in terms of engagement with your covert narcissistic parent. The amount of interactivity and involvement you choose to have with your CNP is a very personal decision. I know people that have chosen to go no contact and they are so much better for it. They are absolutely much happier without their parent in their lives. You've got to decide what is right for yourself. There are so many factors that go into this, such as living situation, where your CNP falls on the continuum, cultural considerations, and those are just a few things. But I promise that whatever decision you make about how far or close to be with your parent, as long as it comes from you, it's the right decision. Now, for those of us who would like to retain a certain amount of contact and connection, I think the polite robot method can be a really good solution. It allows you to converse and show a safe level of compassion for your CNP. And you may choose to do this for a few reasons. For example, you may understand their generational trauma and want to show that you care and empathize. Or it may be due to a personal value that you hold to honor your parents to a certain capacity. And I'm reminded of one woman's story where her father was a covert narcissistic parent who turned into a miserable old man in his old age. No one could stand to be around him, so as a result, he had no friends, no partner, no other family, no one except his daughter. Once every 2 weeks, she would make a 2-hour drive out to his house and bring groceries to him. She'd set a timer and listen to him complain about his life for a couple of hours, and then she'd go home. When interviewed as to why she did this, she said it was for herself. She acknowledged that he didn't deserve her kindness and after how he treated her all her life, but that it was an act of service she did for herself and for her own personal integrity. And I just thought it's a really beautiful way to show how this change in perspective gave this woman power, even though she is still technically spending time with her CNP. And this power shift happens when the decision is yours and not made from a place of guilt, fear, or obligation. If that example resonated with you, I urge you to consider becoming a polite robot. Now, what this means is you have some sort of stress-inducing stimulus that is coming in from your CNP. This can be things like when they're on a narcissistic rant, when they're going down their laundry list of things that isn't going right in their life and listing out who's to blame for all this stuff, when they're gaslighting you, when they're criticizing you. By now, I'm sure you know what this feels like in your body. It's commonly a shortness of breath, tightness in the chest, or a racing heart. When you feel that stimulus occur, you have a pre-programmed response on deck. That's what it means to be a polite robot. You've essentially practiced what response you're going to spit out when they unleash a narcissistic attack on you. So for example, if they're ranting about how their sacrifice is so much bigger and better than anyone else's, you would say, "Wow, it sounds like you've really been putting a lot of care into that project around the house." Or let's say they're uselessly complaining on and on about a refund that they didn't get and probably didn't apply for, because this happens too. Covert or victim narcissists love to complain about how the world is unfair to them, and yet if you really get down to the nitty-gritty of their story, a lot of times they haven't done their part to pull their own weight to find a solution. In this instance, you would say, "Gosh, it would sure be disappointing if you didn't get that refund." You're basically identifying and validating their feeling without contradicting or agreeing to their complaint. You're staying totally neutral. You're being a polite robot. The important thing here is that you are maintaining integrity with both yourself and them. Your CNP has a right to their feelings just as much as you do. By acknowledging that, you give them a validating response without condoning their bad behavior. So now how about when the attacks are more overt? When you feel the CNP gaslighting, you can say something like, I see your perception of that. I see it differently, and that's okay. If they criticize you personally, you can say, "I understand that's your perception of me. I don't agree, but that's okay." And then, of course, you need to know when to get out. There will be times when these responses work to quiet the covert narcissist long enough for you to switch to a safer topic, or there's going to be times, and I promise you this, where they are going to rage back. The bigger the reaction, in fact, the bigger the lie. If you get rage back from a covert narcissistic parent, you can bet there's a fallacy in there. For example, my CNP was trying to pit me against my aunt and uncle by saying that they had tried to hack into my grandmother's bank account. This was completely unsubstantiated, but I could feel his temper rising. Now, in a normal interaction, I might ask more questions or gather more evidence, especially with such a bold claim like this, but not with a CNP. Once I felt a threat in my body, That was my cue to go polite robot and acknowledge his perception, but not confirm his accusation against my aunt and uncle. So my polite robot response was, it sounds like you think they were trying to get into her account and snoop around. And he blew up. He balled up his fists and said, I don't think I know. It's clear as day. If you can't see it, then you're too stupid. Now, this was in a restaurant, mind you, super embarrassing. But plot twist, it was my grandma, actually, who was trying to get into her own account and forgot her password. His allegations against my family were completely false. But my point in telling you this story is that it's important to remember when you get to the point where you are being personally attacked and you feel your defenses ignite, it's time to pull back hard. Polite robot is no longer the solution in these instances. Go gray rock, especially if it's a situation that you cannot leave. Polite robot works well if your goal is to have a conversation with your CNP. But as I said before, there will still be moments where you need to end the interaction immediately and get out. Your emotional safety is not worth it at that point. And you'll know when that is because you'll feel it in your body and you'll hear it in their insults. It is not okay for someone to belittle you and call you stupid or an idiot or make you feel less than. When that happens, you get out and you stay safe. And sometimes that can mean moving to the other side of the table if that's all you have at your disposal at the moment. Putting a physical distance between you can help to diffuse the situation, at least for the time being. Polite robot is really an option for you in the list of interaction levels. Because you've grown up with your CNP your entire life, you're wise to their same old narcissistic tricks. And because it's been a repeated pattern, this means you can come up with canned responses, and they'll all have these basic components. Number one, you're going to repeat what they said using different words, and your vocabulary is going to be so good after doing this. It helps to hone in on their feelings, which almost always is disappointment. It may come as surprising that it's not as much sadness, anger, or irritation. And the reason why is because that makes them the owner of these feelings. Disappointment, by contrast, occurs when something is done to you. Something is done to your CNP. And coverts are professional victims. So they are perpetually disappointed in everyone else who's not doing a good job. Secondly, frame your responses with phrases like, it sounds like, or it seems like, or what I heard you say is. This acknowledges what they've expressed without agreeing to it. You're basically parroting back what they've said to you. And lastly, if there is a personal attack on your character, you can always say, I understand that's your opinion of me. I don't agree with you, but that's okay. And the that's okay part is pretty critical here. It's like a little cushion for their super fragile ego because, as you know, all narcissists are primarily trying to avoid shame. And then one bonus one that I like to use is for the really offensive stuff, and I like to say, that's certainly one opinion. It's very neutral. You don't get into any sort of altercation or argument, but you are acknowledging, in truth, that that is an opinion. It doesn't have to be a good one or one that you're going to accept, but it is one opinion after all. So I hope you guys found this helpful. If you decide to try it out and you like it, let me know in the comments. I definitely use the polite robot method all the time, almost every single conversation with my CNP. And I love it because, well, robots are cool, right? But more importantly, it makes me feel strong, something victims of CNPs don't often feel. And if this resonates with you, I hope that you'll use it and feel invincible, knowing the covert narcissist parent in your life can't hurt you anymore. Thank you again for tuning into this episode of My Emotional Armor. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe and leave a review. And if you have any topics you'd like to hear about on the show, please please fill out the contact form online at myemotionalarmor.com. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, stay safe and armored up.